Good
Alvin.
afternoon.
How are you?
I am fine now that I'm here with you. We are so happy to be able to talk to the very Reverend Ward B. Ewing, and I would like for him to tell us about himself.
Well, I'm getting old, but I haven't been old all the time. So I grew up in the Episcopal Church, was very active in the Episcopal Church. In fact, I believe that my life in church camp may have saved my life. I had a really tough kind of teen years, and that's where I learned that I was a person of value. And until then, I was thinking suicide. God knows what all I was thinking. Met my wife there. We were not married, so that would have been in the 50s. Then I'm going to college in Connecticut. She's from Memphis. I'm from Knoxville. I was glad the diocese was one.
That's right.
But when I graduated from seminary, I was assigned to her home parish.
Nice.
And we had already fallen in love, but things had gotten distant. But then we were married 6 months later. That was in 1968. In Memphis. I was involved with the strike, the garbage strike, the workers, sanitation workers, and that was a tough time. It was an awful time. I mean, the King's death.
You were there right after
I was
the
there.
assassination.
I was at Calvary Church downtown, and we were actively involved. In fact, a funny sort of, it is funny. So after his death, at the demonstration, when Coretta King was speaking at the City Hall, and I never marched without my rector's permission. And so I had been on enough. And he said, let's not march this time. And I said, okay, I have been on enough marches to know that people standing on the sidewalk are supporters. The detractors are upstairs throwing things at you or shouting obscenities.
Right.
But they're not face to face. And he said, well, then let's go, we'll stand on the sidewalk and we'll be present and wear your collar. And okay, so Jenny was with me and we were there during Coretta King's speech. Well, what happened is the crowd moves toward the speaker, right?
Yeah.
And it leaves a little gap between the crowd and the sidewalk. So if you missed our appearance live, you saw it again at 6 and again at 11.
You were just on the news all day.
Yeah. And the author of the book of the history of Calvary Church, Ellen Davies Rogers, would not refer to me by name. She would only refer to me as that unfortunate young man. And so when the book was published, my name wasn't even on the list of clergy. It was totally removed. Well, my son went to Sewanee, in his senior year Sewanee. He called us and said, I've just gotten another scholarship. It's for the outstanding history student. It was given by Ellen Davies Rogers. And I said, would you say that name again?
Yeah.
Yeah, the lady who would not use my name.
Would not use your name.
Yeah.
Talk about that coming back
Funny
around.
things.
Yes.
God has a wonderful sense of humor.
Yes, he does.
And sometimes we get to see it. But so I've served congregations. I was at Calvary. Then we were in Bristol, Tennessee side, for 4 years. Then Frank Servany asked me to come down to Florida. He's a good Tennessean. There's few people here maybe old enough to remember him. I was on his staff at the cathedral. Then he got elected bishop, so it was time for me to go. I went to I really wanted a small congregation, and we went to a small congregation, working class area of Louisville, Kentucky. We're there 10 years. That's where I got involved with work in alcoholism. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then was in Buffalo, New York for 13. Loved it. Learned to love snow. If you don't learn to love snow, you don't stay in Buffalo.
I was just getting ready to ask you about that. Yes, right.
And then was at the seminary, president of the seminary for 12 years. And then now here in Tennessee again.
So some of your students that you had when you were president of general are in this diocese.
Yes.
My rector, Dory Pratt.
Yes, Dory Pratt.
Brad Jones.
And Brad Jones, St. James, John Mark.
John Mark Wiggers.
Witters.
Right.
Those are the students that come to mind. There are other alums.
In the area as well. Now, I know you've written other books and you've collaborated with my dear friend Peter Keys on
Right.
one of his books too.
Right.
But one book that I am very interested in is 12 Steps to Religionless Spirituality. What brought you to that topic and scholarship?
Okay. So I got involved, as I said, in Louisville when I was in Louisville. So I was in Louisville from 75 to 85. Blue collar congregation, very blue collar area, Valley Station, Southwest Jefferson County. L&N Yards on one side, no roads across. Ohio River on the other. The Beltway around Louisville in the north end and Fort Knox in the south. I mean, absolute ghetto. Average, everybody, most people had no college. I had one, when I went there, I had one person who had college degree in the congregation. And there was some cultural differences, and one of was how they drank. I was accustomed to people drinking and getting drunk at the country club and vomiting on the floor, maybe denting a car going out, but that was just because they'd had a bad week, right? I hadn't been there more than about 3 months when a parishioner called me and said, "You got to go see my husband." And I said, "What?" And she said, he got paid, this is Saturday morning, he got paid yesterday, went to a bar, spent his whole paycheck, got in a fight, and he's in jail. And I'm not talking to him, so you need to go talk to him. And I had absolutely no idea what I would say, what I would do. Nothing. And I realized I knew nothing about alcoholism. And later, as I learned, I discovered I had been a pretty good enabler of helping people feel okay having had some problems with drink. But it was just a little problem. Well, it wasn't a little problem. No. And but so I started attending open AA meetings as a way of learning. And but what really changed my life is a member of our parish who was active in AA walked into my office one day. His name is Willie, and he said, "Ward, you're the spiritual expert, right?" And I think I had enough sense not to answer that. And he said, "I'm out of touch with God. The last time I was out of touch with my higher power, I drank. And if I drink again, I may die. I need you to put me back in touch with God." And he was literally deadly serious. So I knew I couldn't do that. But we had a little conversation, then I met the next day and had a conversation. We decided that what we needed were members of AA who wanted to talk about their spiritual issues in their life, because Alcoholics Anonymous is really a spiritual program. The steps are a spiritual program. And in the beginning, it's easy, but then you get doubts, you get questions, and it gets harder for many people, not everybody. So we met every Tuesday afternoon for the next 5 years. Wow. And there were 5 or 6 of us that varied, but they all had at least 5 years sobriety in AA and wanted to discuss their spiritual life. Well, the spiritual expert got transformed. That's when I began using the 12 Steps as my primary spiritual program.
And that can happen. You become transformed yourself when you try
absolutely.
to help other people. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And it has made my life, made my faith stronger. It has made my capability to act stronger. It has given me a sense of self that I love the church. The church saved my life, but AA and the steps gave me a program and a language that connected even deeper, and has been one of the problems clergy have is we have no one. People don't want us to be honest. They want us to be good.
Oh,
you know, we want our clergy to be good.
Right.
They don't want us to be honest. In AA, they don't care what you did, what you're thinking, what your concerns are, as long as you seek to be as honest as you possibly can, period. And that group's the first time I ever experienced a group of people where the expectation was, you will be as honest as possible. Dealing with spiritual issues. I mean, we weren't dealing with a whole bunch of hard stuff in terms of human morality or anything. We were dealing with who is God, how do we know God, how do we turn our lives and our wills over to God as we understand Him, and so on. It was, in a very, very honest way. And since that time, whenever I would have a support group, I always made sure I had a member of AA in it. They have a very good BS preventer. and the discussion goes deeper. And it's just, the community is incredibly powerful. And anyway, that's when I began. And then we moved to Buffalo, and I tried to build the same kind of group, but you get a gift once. And I never was able to put a group that worked as well as that group in Valley Station did.
Were you able to do some of this work with the students at General Seminary?
Yeah, when I got
go out and do the same facilitating.
When I got to General, one of the first things I did, if it wasn't that fall, it was the next year. We put together a course on the church's role, on the church and alcoholism and the role of the pastor in understanding it, diagnosing, intervention, and even finding support through the 12-step program. Was the most popular course by student evaluations every year. It was the most popular course. We never made it required, because if you require it, you're going to get somebody who's struggling with alcohol, and they will sabotage that course.
I see.
So we never did require it, but it still continues. Great. So that's been, and now finally, when we started it, I was also on the board of the Association of Theological Schools, and there was not another school in the country, any denomination, that had a program on alcoholism, church's role, and pastor's role. And now there's several, and I think I give thanks for that.
Great.
Because the church can be a fabulous support, and clergy know alcoholics probably than any other professional group. They just don't know they know them. And when they learn, I remember one student came to me after the class. I didn't teach the class. I got people to teach. I would usually introduce it, maybe take one class or something. But one of the students came to me and said, "They're everywhere." He says, "I just see everybody drinking in ways that are clearly inappropriate. Oh, yeah. What is going on here?" And I said, "Well, your eyes have been opened." And so I continue to be involved with AA fellowship as well. Then, so I'm looking for a CFO for the seminary. And one of the things I learned to do, the things you learn to do is in any interview, student or particularly for employment, I ask about their drinking and their family history of addiction. And it's a good thing to know.
Exactly.
I don't know why everybody doesn't just assume that's what we ought to do, because boy, you can get the wrong person in there who needs to recover, and you got trouble. Yeah. But so the person I was interviewing for CFO said, "Well, I've got 24 years sobriety in AA. Why did you ask that question?" And so I told him a little bit of what I've just told you. And so we ended up talking about my story in AA and his story in AA, and he took the job for 24 hours. The next day he called back and said, "My partner said I can't take this job. I just retired and we got to retire." So, okay, so I ended up getting it. So 3 months later, he calls me up and said, "There's a position on the board of Alcoholics Anonymous, a trustee. Would you be willing to let us put your name in?" And that's how I became a trustee. And then chair of the board. Great. Now I've rotated out of that. And the 4 chairs continue as emeritus trustees and are expected to attend and say, our main line is, "Well, this is a lot like what it was 8 years ago when I was," because the board rotates every member rotates every 4 years, the alcoholic members, and they lose the memory. Great. So we're there to be memory.
Great. Could you please, Ward, tell us some more about your work in Memphis, especially as it relates to working for social justice,
right,
but where there was racial inequality?
Right. Well, let me start before that.
Okay.
Because I was raised in the segregated South. I was raised in Knoxville, moved here when I was 7 years old. My father was with the university, went to Bearden High School. No African Americans in Bearden High School.
No.
Played basketball. We didn't play the African American school. I mean, I had no experience of cross-racial relationship. And I was very active in, as I said, I think church camp may have saved my life. I was very active in the youth program in the diocese. And my senior year in high school was the president of the program, of the House of Young Churchmen. And I was asked to go to a conference in Middle Tennessee as a representative. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't know who, I think the National Council of Churches sponsored it, but I can't swear to that. But I got there, and I discovered that 1/3 of us were white and 2/3 of us were African American. And it was just startling. Now, one of the things you need to know about I have a very high metabolism rate. And as a young person, I ate a lot. I would go to town on Saturday. Back when crystals were 2 for a quarter.
Oh yeah.
I'd get $1. I'd get what's that, 8 hamburgers to eat on the bus going home before I had lunch. And I might even go to the neighbor, my friend, the neighbor, and have another lunch. I mean, I ate a lot. I discovered these folks couldn't go to the Crystal and get a dozen hamburgers.
Right.
I was outraged. I mean, they couldn't do what I did every day.
And took for granted.
Every Saturday.
Right.
Just took for granted. It was a wonderful week. And we became very close. There's no following anybody. I don't have any names or anything today. But that's where I learned the freedom songs. And they made up a special verse for me. Lord is our garbage can, he may not be filled. Lord is our garbage can.
That's
like
clever.
a tree standing by the water, he shall not be filled. Anyway, that just changed my whole perception. And it wasn't forced, it was just, I was just blindsided. And from that moment, and my parents were university. I mean, they were very much pro-integration. But I began to follow King in college, and I began to think I needed to be more involved in this. In seminary, a group of us, it was really sponsored by Boone Porter, the liturgics professor, came down and joined the Selma to Montgomery march on the day coming into Montgomery, and heard King's speech. The moral arm of history is long, but it bends toward justice. That was that speech. And from that day on, that's been one of my cardinal beliefs. That was amazing. Then the next, I guess it was after my middle year in seminary. Well, yeah, I was in the Dominican Republic for a summer working. That was the year after the revolution. There were no Anglos there. I did not see, the only white folks I saw were riding Jeeps behind machine guns. And it was a total immersion into the Dominican culture. My Spanish was good enough to preach a little. I do vacation Bible school, worked in the church. San Andres, wonderful. The priest eventually became bishop. Wonderful, wonderful priest. Telesro Isaac. Anyway, I'm wandering around here. I became unconscious about color because everybody else, I didn't look in the mirror much. So I didn't see any white folk.
Right.
I mean, I think that really was I don't know how else you get there, that you're not conscious about the person's skin when you've been raised in the segregated South. It's hard. That was important. And then when I graduated, we came to Memphis, and it was that fall that the sanitation workers went on strike.
Right.
There were meetings. My rector, Bob Atkinson, Bob Atkinson, eventually Bishop of West Virginia. Everybody I ever worked for became a bishop. Poor things. But he was very supportive. I never marched or even went to a meeting that he wasn't there. The march I remember among the most dramatic. The real leader of the effort for the Episcopal Church was the dean of the cathedral, Dean Dimick. And we had a meeting, black and white, in the cathedral. And somebody said, it's time to go talk to the mayor. And we decided it was time to go talk to the mayor.
Sure.
And which was about a half a mile walk. The dean took the cathedral's processional cross, and we headed down Poplar Avenue and got into the mayor's office. Later saw a picture as we were there from behind the mayor. Under his desk was a rifle set to, he could have reached down and anytime and killed who knows how many. We didn't even know enough to be afraid. But there were probably 60 or 70 people in that march. It was spontaneous, and the dean got in trouble, and they criticized him for taking the cathedral's cross. Not because he was standing for justice.
Right.
Yeah, right. I was not present at the I've been to the mountain speech. I wish I had been, obviously. And then King's death. Memphis just closed down. It was that his assassin was caught was a miracle. But for some reason, they decided to stop the buses. So here are all these folks who work in town who depended on the bus to get home, and they were just stranded.
Yeah.
So I spent all afternoon until it got dark, picking people up, driving them home. I don't know what else to do. It was an awful day. Ended up in West Memphis in a friend's apartment, watching it on television. It was really sad. And I guess the combination of those events literally changed my life. My life's been changed a lot, and it's always somehow the church and God who've done that to me. Sneaky fella. She is very sneaky. But continue to work for justice. Probably the struggle I was more involved in was with homosexuality. My roommate in seminary was gay. We didn't ever talk about it particularly. He dated some of the worst looking girls I'd ever seen. Said he wasn't interested in that. And it was really only after seminary and we're still in touch. We see each other when I'm in New York. And he, but afterward, he actually came out. I knew he was gay, but he actually came out from the pulpit. He was on the staff at Trinity Wall Street. That's where he came out, and that's where they told him he could go work somewhere else. And for a long time, he was in the bank. But he's back in the priesthood.
Great.
But and other close friends. I'm sorry for the Methodists.
Yes.
They just messed up really bad. And I haven't paid enough attention to, we're not going to go away. But what a sad thing.
It is sad.
What a sad thing. And I think our church did pretty well.
Yes.
I think we did pretty well. General Seminary had been open to gay and lesbian folks for a long time. I didn't have to do that one.
The work was done.
I did. One of the other things I brought to General was we were in the process of developing an MDiv program in Spanish, which was a struggle because most of the students in Spanish couldn't afford tuition. They were mostly local. The professors were hard, but we did put together a program, and it was still running when I retired. But We just got to understand about inclusion in our church, in our world. But if the church can't get it, how's the world going to get it?
And, inclusion is in the Gospels.
Oh, it's at the heart of the gospel.
And so to me, it's very simple.
It's absolutely, yeah. Is God love or not? If God is love, does God choose who he's going to love? I don't think so. I think she loves each and every one of us. Totally beyond what we can even conceive. And one of the things I do when I'm teaching, sometimes doing groups, I will ask the group, and I've done it in sermons too, to say, I am lovable. I mean, after all, God loves you. You must be lovable.
You must be lovable.
Right?
You're right.
It's a hard thing for people to say. We don't really believe that.
That we're lovable.
That brings me to another topic. All right?
Sure.
Can we keep jumping?
I'm loving it.
All right. So, somewhere, all of us carry a sense of shame. It's past things we've done, failures we've had, hardships. The place that I really began to understand about shame was in the work in addiction. Alcoholics. A friend of mine said the other day, I have a lot of guilt, but it's no reason for me to have shame. And I thought, wow, what an insight. That was sort of a new twist on it. They do a lot of things that are not very good. I mean, alcoholism is a disease, but, well, let me come back to that in a second. And it causes a lot of awful things. I mean, DWI is not anything to sort of say, I'm sorry you had a bad week about.
Yeah.
And we've had our experience in the Episcopal Church. So there's a lot of reason you could feel shame, but when you begin to discover that it's a disease, that it really wasn't choice, you kind of need to let go of that. And for those of us who are not alcoholic, there's a huge need to treat the folks as not as somehow culpable, but they're suffering from a disease, even when they're still active. And certainly afterward, there's no reason for shame. And what shame does is we hide.
Of course.
We hide. And that makes it, that's part of why people don't say, I need to get help. I'm drinking too much, and I'm going to do things I'm going to be ashamed of, that I'm going to feel guilty about if I don't get some help, because I don't seem to be able to control it. People don't say that, because I think largely because of shame. And people don't confront them because it feels like they're accusing. I think most, in the Episcopal Church anyway, not all churches, we all believe that alcoholism is a disease, but we act like it's a choice.
Gotcha.
Why doesn't he go get help? Can't he see? Look what he's doing. He's destroying his family. He's lost his job.
I've been guilty of saying that myself. Yeah.
Why can't he do something? He needs to do something about that.
Right.
The whole point is he cannot
He can't
do
help
that.
it. Right.
He cannot do that. And he needs an intervention and to stop drinking for even a week or two, and then needs to begin a spiritual program that will remake his whole orientation and free him from alcohol. One of the things I like to say is, I think, another gripe of mine, I don't think we really believe in the power of spirituality. I mean, I see it in AA. I see miracle after miracle after miracle. One of my good friends was absolutely on the street, selling her body in order to get drink. Was sitting begging, and a friend in AA, or somebody in AA, stopped and said, "Would you like a cup of coffee? Come with me." Took her to an AA meeting. In that case, not always, but in that case, it changed everything. And she started going to meetings, and then she was free. Now she's a professional, fabulous job, very top drawer. I see that all the time in AA. We ought to see it in the church. but I'm not sure we believe that the Spirit, and that's because of a spiritual program. So if I'm an alcoholic and I have no capability of stopping drinking, no capability of making the choices that I need to make for health, I get into AA. I discover that my life is unmanageable because of my drinking. I come to understand that a power greater than myself can bring me to sanity. And I turn my life and my will over to God as I understand Him. You know what happens? With some people, almost immediately the compulsion to drink stops. But with most, by the end of 2 years, there's no compulsion anymore. There's temptation, but there's no compulsion. And that's the power of spirituality. It's a spiritual program, and it literally, we understand now that alcoholism all addiction is a disease of the brain. The brain has gotten programmed to where the substance is more important than anything else in the person's life, and that's all in the primitive brain, the amygdala, and all that stuff. That gets healed by a spiritual program. This stuff of the Spirit is powerful, but I don't think the church really believes it. I don't think people come to the church in order to gain a whole new life. The gospel says it. We're going to have new life. For years I came to say, well, I did this, this, and this, and I'm going to get forgiven for it. Now I'm okay. I didn't deal with any of it. But it's really the power of spirituality can transform it all. And I think I'm not the only person in church that people think ought to be good. I think our senior wardens ought to be good. We think our active members ought to be good.
Sure. Yeah.
And if they have any sense of shame, they're just going to hide. They're just going to hide it. And part of what makes AA so powerful is rigor. The catchphrase is rigorous honesty. Those who have rigorous honesty can make it in this program no matter what the other problems they've got. There's problems of sexuality, there's problems of mental illness, but if a person is rigorously honest, they can make it.
They can make it.
And I don't think we in the church have figured that one out yet. The phrase rigorous honesty changed my life, because when I'm getting ready to sort of say a little, oh, it wasn't so bad, or I don't know, I forgot to shave this morning, and I walk around
Covering it.
Yeah, I say, no, rigorous honesty.
Just
All
in
those
shape.
little ways of trying to appear better than I really am go out the window, and it's so freeing and so fabulous, and it's a spiritual program that's doing that.
Tell me about your family.
Well, I said I met my wife at
Camp.
Camp Gaylor Maxson, and we were actually driving home yesterday, coming back from New Hampshire to New York. We're talking about our meeting and funny stuff. You don't need all this, but we sort of, even as campers, we were kind of shy about each other. It was really cute. But then I was the counselor, she was a camper, and then we were both counselors together. And that's when we really understood that we were in love.
So I know you went to General Seminary, and you went to undergraduate school
at Trinity College in
Hartford. But she was not at Trinity.
No, she went to what was then Southwestern, now Rhodes.
Which is Rhodes, okay.
And then she transferred to UT. And part of the reason was that she would see me when I came home. and then just, anyway, we did not do it smoothly. It was kind of, somehow I think we were just fearful.
Apparently that's okay.
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah, no. So then in those days, once I was accepted as a postulant, I had a job. I didn't have to look for a job my senior year. I knew I was going somewhere. I just didn't know where. And the bishop appointed me to Calvary for a year as a deacon. And that's where we reconnected. And as I said, 9 months later, we were married.
And how many children?
We have 3 children. I have a daughter who's the youngest is a singer, has her doctorate in opera from LSU, and lives in Chattanooga with her husband, goes to St. Paul's, and sings in the choir and does other performing some, and teaches. My middle child is also a daughter. She's never married. She lives in New York. She was in physical therapy. She graduated from Emory and with a master's in physical therapy, and looked at what they pay physical therapists in Atlanta, what it was going to cost her to live in Atlanta, what they paid physical therapists in New York City, and what it was going to cost her to live with her parents. And that was it's kind of a no-brainer to get started. And so she came to New York, and she loves it. She actually ended up owning 2 apartments because one's rented. She bought a new apartment and COVID hit, and she didn't get the other one sold, but managed to get through. And she loves New York and is doing really well. She's moved out of healthcare delivery into finance, and she works with National Bank of Canada, Royal Bank of Canada, in bonding for not-for-profit hospitals. And most people don't understand how our healthcare system works, probably those who are running it.
That makes sense.
It is a mess.
It's
well,
a
she
hot
worked in
mess,
it for 14 years.
Okay. Yeah.
And she comes with a level of experience, including working for Moody's in rating hospitals. So they're very happy to have her, and they're rewarding her nicely. My oldest is my son, who has an MBA from University of Texas, Austin, and is in Seattle. He has 3 children. The oldest is in New York at, well, I'm blanking on the name of it. We just saw him. He's a senior. And then his brother is a freshman at Saratoga Springs. My mind is not working good. I'm not getting those names. And then the youngest is in high school in Seattle. We always told our children that my brother ended up living many years, 15 or 20 years in Alaska. I had an uncle in Alaska. We always told our kids it's fine to live anywhere in the 48, but not in Alaska or Hawaii. Well, we did not mean Seattle either. we
forgot to just narrow
we
it
didn't
down
get that one
bit.
framed just right.
Right.
But they've done well, and he's active in his church. Jennifer loves the church and goes occasionally, and then Lucy is active,
Of course.
singing,
Great.
for which I give great thanks.
I know. Now, do you do any? I know you're retired,
Right.
But do you do any supply work? Do you preach still?
I have some physical difficulties of age that to celebrate is very difficult.
I got you.
So I don't supply. I do preach occasionally. I just finished a course at our church at St. Paul's, Athens, in Lent on the book of Revelation, which is one of my books. That came out of the experience in the blue-collar community. So in Louisville, in Valley Station, in the blue-collar community, there was a level of hostility that I had never experienced. There's 2 curious things. One, it's the least racist place I've ever lived. But the level of anger was something that I'd never experienced either. And I was trying to figure that out and thought maybe since the book of Revelation is so popular in a lot of those churches, maybe if I could study that, maybe I could learn a bit more. I really came to first of all, most people don't understand the book of Revelation. If you want to understand it, you need to get my book, The Power of the Lamb. Revelation is about power. It's not about the end of the world and Jesus coming. In fact, Revelation over and over and over says the Messiah has come and we have won the victory. We won the victory on the cross, and we're just mopping up. The critical battle's been done. We know that love is the most powerful power, and we're going to sing the songs of Zion, and the beast is going to just fall apart. I mean, that's the story of Revelation. And I came to understand they love this because it's about power. And it's written to a people who are without power. I mean, Revelation is one of the few books in the Bible that is the literature of the underclass. I mean, who are the bad guys? The rich, the governing, the elite. This is literature of the underclass, and it's deep, deep gospel at that level. And I finally have come to the conclusion, and despite all the recent politics, I'm still there. So we went into Louisville during, speaking of racism, during the anti-busing riots. They burned buses between my house and the church. I took a long way home. And I'm in a Volkswagen van, which at that point was, might as well had said peace, justice, and love all over it. Anyway, even then I said, these folks are not racist. They don't think of themselves as superior. Racists just say, I'm superior, you're inferior.
Right.
And that was, I didn't see that, didn't hear that. Now they were angry. And when the government decided, and this was a population, most of whom had come through Ellis Island, moved to the Midwest, and then south to Louisville, and then had moved out of Louisville. Each generation moved to a little bit better situation. And now those people were telling me they're going to send my children to the school that my parents worked to get us out of. And we have no say in it. Then we get the recession of 1980, which was, unemployment was worse then than it's ever been, including most recently, other than the Depression. And it was all blue collar. We were 20% unemployed in our community. Wow. And they had no way to fight it, nothing they could do, and except be angry.
No power.
No power. And even though part of the problem is the press understood it as racist. So if that's your understanding, you look for those signs and you find it. Because they were screaming about, you're taking my kids and sending them to these schools. But it just wasn't the same thing. Living there, 10 years. I like to think I have some insight. I would hope. And it's going to be a hard thing to get this country back together.
Yeah. It's, and pretty obvious, the challenge.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I'm beginning to say myself, I won't be here.
No, I don't expect it. I don't expect to be here when
Exactly.
if this country can get itself back together. But somewhere, it's a deep, deep inequality that's economic and prejudicial, and those who are at the bottom have no power, and a few at the top make a lot of decisions that affect everybody else.
Yes. I can't thank you enough for the insight you've given me today.
Oh, well, thank you.
This has been such a treat.